Are we really on CPT tonight?
We're live. Hello.
I think we officially decided that we were on CPT. This is our first CPT hangout of the year. It's different variations of colored people on tonight. It is an African tradition. Trust me, when I was in Cameroon, one of the things that I learned was that Cameroonian time was different than everybody else's time. So we apologize for our brief lapse of timeliness tonight. Typically we are on time, but I'm over here working on somewhat of a jalopy of a computer. Nonetheless, just because we want to be formal and we want to welcome you, everyone say hello. Get our wave on. We've got a full house tonight from all
you
over
guys
the country.
can unmic as we go.
Yeah, so go ahead.
They'll call you out one by one.
Yes. So let's see. We'll go from left to right in my window. So that would be Angela Walton Raji will be first. Yes, you.
Hello, everyone. Hello. It's good to be here. And can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. And you have to tell us your name and where you're from.
Well, Angela Walton Raji, originally from Arkansas and Oklahoma, but currently in Maryland, in Catonsville, Maryland.
All right. Next up is the beautiful and illustrious Latina, my good buddy, Ellen Fernandez-Sacco.
Hey, Mika, I'm glad to be here. I am born in New York City and now living in Tampa, Florida.
All right, all right. Next up is the Mr. of the group, Mr. Y Chromosome. Go ahead and hit us up real quick.
I don't even know how I can top that, Mr. Y Chromosome. Wow. This is James Morgan III coming to you from the great state of Maryland, but I'm originally from Washington, D.C. with my North Carolina roots, and I'm also the Virgo of the group because my birthday is on Monday, so shout out to all the Virgos out there in internet land.
Happy birthday in advance.
All right, next up is Linda Bug Sims.
Hi, everybody. I'm Linda Bug Sims from St. Louis, Missouri. Born and raised.
Born and raised. All right, all right. Next up is Renata Sanders.
Oh, hey, this is Renata Sanders. I'm coming in from Newport News, Virginia, born in Cleveland, Ohio, and all of my ancestry is in North Carolina.
North Cackalack. All right, up next is the So What Queen herself, aka Shelly. Sorry, Dr. Shelly.
I owe that money. Give me that title because I owe that money. This is Shelley from Central Virginia, born and raised in Michigan.
All right, next
Glad
up,
to be here.
She's glad to be here. We're taking up collections at the end for me, a new computer. She's going to lead the collection plate.
I will pass that plate around.
Next up is the, let's see, Miss Boricua, Radiant Roots, Boricua Precious is my girl, Teresa Vega.
Teresa.
Hola, hola.
Hola.
All right, she's coming.
All right, I'm off mute.
Yes, she's off mute.
I am new to the and so I'm happy to be here. Originally from Boston, Mass, so you'll hear my Pak the Khan Haviyad, New York City based, and I'm happy to be here tonight. I'll be lurking. I don't have any ancestors that I know of yet in the Carolinas, but I'm always interested in learning on to others, if not for my own use. So I'm happy to be here.
All right.
Teresa has roots in a great town though.
Yep.
She does. She does. All right. Next up is the beautiful and very, very illustrious Ms. Lowell Country Africana. Drum roll. Tony Carrier.
Hi, everybody. I'm new to the group tonight, too, so my screen's a little dark. I'm at my condo. I'm Cajun French and from Louisiana, but I live in Tampa. and I work in Charleston. So I drove up today from Tampa to Charleston. Rain all the way, which was quite a trial, but happy to be here and glad to be joining the group tonight.
All right, next up is the awesome True, is her real name, Lewis.
Yay! Hello, everybody. It's me from My True Roots, and I was born and raised in Pennsylvania, and I live in Fort Knox, Kentucky, and I'm just excited to do this again. We had so much fun last season, so I'm ready to go.
All right. So we're going to start off with something a little bit different this time. We're going to thank Shelly Murphy for this because Shelly is, despite common belief, Shelly Murphy is stinking hilarious. If you have not known that or you don't know that at this point, just get yourself prepared because she's pretty funny. And actually, we're going to actually start a new tradition here on BlackProGen Live. And you're probably like, what is it? And we are going to do a top 10 list at the beginning of our show. You're thinking, what do you mean top 10 list? I'm talking top 10 list as in like your boy, David Letterman. So today's top 10 that we have tonight is top 10 reasons why you're watching BlackProGen Live. And this is all care of the illustrious Shelly Murphy. All right. So let's see. Number 10. You didn't have anything else better to do tonight, and it's live.
That's good.
All right. Number 9. You attended the International Black Genealogy Summit and heard some of the speakers on the panel. That's probably true.
As a speaker at IBGS, I think that's a great reason. That's a really good reason. As one of the speakers that was there, that's a great reason.
It's a great reason. All right, next. You made it to the 1870 U.S. Census. Now what? All right. Number 7. Because Big Mama said you're related to Jodeci, Fantasia, and Dave Hollister, but you want to find out how. People who are watching are probably like, what do they have to do with this? Well, all of those people are from North Carolina.
North Carolina.
I didn't even know that.
Number 6. Someone told you the panel was going to solve your brick wall in 1 hour or less.
Lie.
All right. The next one, number 5. You're wondering when BlackProGen became a reality show because you haven't seen it on BET or OWN.
I'm just saying we need to do Oprah's genealogy because I don't think they did it right.
Well, yes, they have. It was on the first season of Finding Your Roots. Actually, it was African American Lives.
But they didn't have Angela Walton Raji on it though.
They did not.
If they get Angela on it, we'll take her back to biblical days.
Oh my goodness. Did you know that Oprah is related to Moses? Here's how. All right, number 4. You were told you would get a slot on the next Genealogy Roadshow. They know Kenyatta. which is true. That is true.
We all do.
We all do.
Yes, I do personally.
So do I. Yeah.
Exactly. All of us do. You saw Shelly in that crazy so what stuff, which is why she's Shelly Dr. Shelly so what Murphy. All right, number 2. You heard this is the place for Maggie Scholarship. And that's very well possible that it could be. And can we get a drum roll? Number 1. Who really is Nika Smith? So tonight, that is your BlackProGen top 10. And we have that's officially our newest thing that we're going to be adding to the show. We thought it would actually be pretty funny to go ahead and add that in as a little bit of comic relief before we get to our topic. So with that said, just a reminder, everybody, we do have a new Twitter account. So if you are on Twitter and would like to tweet us questions regarding North and South Carolina genealogy research, please feel free to do that. Also, if you are interested in our 2 new segments that are going to be airing in our 2017 iteration of this show, which is called Ask MARIAH, where you're able to pose your brick wall questions and then our panel will work them out live online. Feel free to do that. And also we have 4 spots available for the Ancestry Maker segment that will be taking place next year, where we'll be doing the full panel of genealogy research for some lucky person. And they won't just get sheets of paper. They'll actually get a really nice compilation of what we discover. So wanted to go ahead and throw those things out there for now, but now is the time for us to discuss the topic at hand. North Carolina. We've got several people here who are actually experts in this area, one of them being Renata, the other being Bernice Walton. I'm calling her Bernice Walton Raji.
They have fused into one entity.
We'll just blend them together.
Exactly. I'm calling her Bernice Walton Raji. Lord, if she can hear me now. Bernice has done a fair amount of research in South Carolina. Tony Carrier is an excellent resource for the Low Country area when it comes to research as well. So let's go in alphabetical order. Let's just start off with North Carolina. And at this point, you know, people who have been watching as far as our state-specific, you know, shows and broadcasts have gone, you know, we talk about the history of the area just briefly because a lot of that stuff is Googleable. What we want to get to really is, how do you find your people? What are the best resources in those locations? How can we maximize what we have available online and then also what we have available offline? So with that said, let's start with Tony. What would you tell people about South Carolina or the Low Country area?
About South Carolina, goodness, it's a wonderful place to work because we have a robust record set to work with. You know, South Carolina, particularly Port Royal, was ground zero for the beginning of Reconstruction and for Sherman's Special Field Order 15. So, you know, Reconstruction really started here in 1861 when Port Royal was captured by Union forces. So there's a really, really rich Reconstruction record. Also, there are a lot of South Carolina record sets that will help you tighten up the period between 1865 and 1870. There's just a wonderful plethora of those. We do have a lot of burn counties for a couple of reasons, just courthouse fires in the 1880s, et cetera. But another reason is that during the Civil War, a lot of the counties sent their records to Columbia, to the state archives for safekeeping, and Sherman went through Columbia and he burned the state archives. So some of the records, for instance, for Colleton County or Lancaster actually ended up burning in Columbia. But beside that, we just have a really robust record set. We also have some wonderful archives in South Carolina, and also some of the North Carolina archives have South Carolina records. So I've got like a whole list of record sets that that I can go through with you. What I'll do is I'll blog about these on Low Country Africana tonight, and then you can that way you don't have to scribble if we go through them. But that's lowcountryafricana.com, and just go to our blog and you'll find the list on there.
Awesome. Renata, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, I'm not as well versed on the history to add for North Carolina, but I'd just like to say that North Carolina is one of the states that has a plethora of resources online. Lots of digitizing has been done. So in addition to Ancestry.com and Family Search and regular sites like that, the Wilson Library at UNC has done a fantastic job with digitizing. They have a Southern collection there. The library at Duke also, the Rubenstein Library, also has a very good collection. And the State Archives of North Carolina, as Tony mentioned about South Carolina, has also really worked hard to put a lot of information online. I think we all want to remind people that not everything is online. I think the last statistic I heard was 10% of everything that's out there is available online. But North Carolina has made lots of records available for people to get started. Also, lots of newspaper collections are available for North Carolina.
All right. So now that we've...
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I can also put links up if we can, I don't know if we're going to put them up through here, but I can do something on Into the Light if need be to shared links for North Carolina research also.
All right, and I think we've got a live chat going as well. Those comments will probably end up at the bottom of the YouTube video once we're done. That way people can search there as well for some of the, especially the really important links, things that you absolutely don't want anybody to miss. We can go ahead and add those to the simulcast. So let's get started. Anyone that I guess knows geography, maybe a smidgen, knows that these areas were both once together as one, just Carolina, and then eventually they were separated into North and South Carolina. When it comes to people of color and their experiences in those particular regions, at least in my experience now, I'm steeped in where Tony is from, Louisiana, right? That's where I'm at. That's where I spend most of my time. But one of the things I have noticed is that if you do a measure of amount of time of DNA research, everybody that I know is tracing back to North and South Carolina. It's almost impossible for people not to be tracing back there, especially when it comes to your DNA matches, your genetic cousins, those people that, you haven't yet figured out how you all tie together, but there's some relation because you share DNA. But they're showing up with Edgefield, South Carolina, Charleston. When someone is noticing that these folks are matching them, and they have those locations, in particular in South Carolina, what could that possibly mean?
Oh, you're asking me, Nika?
Yes.
Everyone's
like, I don't know.
Tony.
Well, there are a lot of reasons for that. Number one, Charleston was a major importing port in the Atlantic slave trade, and from the very earliest colonial times on. And then later in South Carolina's history, in the 1830s and then again in the 1850s, there was a surge in the domestic slave trade. And so by 1835, South Carolina had become an exporting state. So you had people coming in quantities from Africa, and I think it's been estimated that of the people who were brought to to North America from Africa, it's been estimated that anywhere from 20 to 40% of the people who were brought in through Charleston. Mm-hmm. And Charleston had a major partnership between Henry Lawrence, who was here in Charleston, and then Richard Oswald, who was at Bunce Island in Sierra Leone. And so there were many ships that went directly from Sierra Leone that were brought here. So yeah, it's a combination of import and then export in the domestic slave trade. And then I would say one more thing, and that was that after Port Royal was captured in 1861, a lot of slaveholders went to Texas because Texas was sort of the last bastion of slavery at that time. And for instance, there were 3 Drayton brothers in Charleston who were slaveholders, and they all ended up in Brazoria, Texas, with all of their enslaved community with them. So some of that DNA traces right to Texas. So there's a variety of reasons, but so many people do trace to South Carolina.
And when you talk about the Low Country, when you're referencing South Carolina, what area is covered in the Low Country?
Right. Well, we kind of, in the strictest sense of Low Country, it would be those areas below the middle of the state, below the Piedmont. So they have the upcountry, the Piedmont, and the Low Country here. The Low Country is all of those lower and coastal counties in South Carolina. But for our purposes, we know that people didn't just stay in one small place. So we actually specialize in anywhere in North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, and Georgia. So we kind of take in the whole southeastern, typically rice growing areas, which is home to the Gullah Geechee cultural heritage that rose up here.
Okay, so then is there a link between Louisiana and the Carolinas when it comes to slave trade? Is that something that, because I believe I know the answer, but.
Definitely there is. Usually when someone here was sold away, they were either taken to Mobile, Alabama, or New Orleans. And you do see in a lot of the plantation records here that are preserved in archives, sold to New Orleans. You do see on some of the inward slave manifests for New Orleans, you do see people bringing enslaved people through the domestic slave trade into New Orleans.
Which would make sense as to why my lineage, there's some South Carolinian hiding.
Right.
In me, right? I still
do you know where yet, Nika?
Well, it's Edgefield. It's pretty much Edgefield for me. So there's got to be some tie to Miss Bernice, because now with DNA, I know that it's on my father's side. And I've discovered that one of my great-grandparents had ancestors that lived in the Florida parishes, which is something I didn't know about. And Miss Bernice has a tie to the Florida parishes and to Edgefield, South Carolina. Wow. So it may be that we just don't match each other genetically, or we haven't tested the person with the right cocktail of DNA in our families to find that that 8 centimorgan match. So so let's see, we've got some questions. Let's see, Shelly Murphy, go ahead and chime in since you got some questions from Miss Tony Carrier.
Well, when I heard her mention Gullah Geechee heritage per se, how would one get started if they believed, and I think James said that he thinks he has Gullah Geechee ancestry, but how would someone figure that out or know that if it didn't come down oral history wise? Right. Is there something in the DNA, or is there something we know by certain areas? You spoke of Low Country as being primarily coastal.
Right.
Say counties, right. And and I know in Georgia, I know there's Sapelo Island. I've been there, read a good book about Sapelo Island. So I'm just trying to understand if I wanted to venture in, and because when I think of Gullah Geechee, I don't think of the Carolinas. I think of Louisiana and Mississippi.
Oh wow,
way down deep. So I don't think of it on the Carolinas. And again, it's just places where I've been and that's been presented to me. So how would someone start that? And I could go to Tony or, others.
Anybody else?
This is Teresa. I have a question. I'm like almost done with my second blog post on Madagascar. And one of the things I found out was in the these New York merchants to the Caribbean, then went to Madagascar. On the way back of call was Charleston. And I know that Charleston was settled by these Bayesian and these traders. By 1700, half the slaves in Barbados were Malagasy. So I know that there's some information that should be out there. I know that there's also a form of rice that was found in the Carolinas that came from Madagascar. I was wondering if you had any, because in some of my blog posts, people are always asking me about the Malagasy connection to Charleston. But I
haven't seen yet any records documenting direct linkages to Madagascar, but the rice connection is certainly there. And I think there's a DNA connection. I see a lot of people connecting with Madagascar heritage, connecting to South Carolina. But I haven't seen anything yet in all the plantation journals, et cetera, in the archives. Haven't seen a mention of Madagascar yet.
That's what I'm thinking. We're talking from mid to late 1600s, early 1700s.
And there was an enormous, there's a very significant connection between Barbados and Carolina. When the Carolina colony was first founded, it was founded primarily by those who had settled in Barbados. And there wasn't a lot of arable land on Barbados, so eventually the colony got very crowded. And a lot of people then moved on to colonize the Carolina colony. Well, during the early times of the Carolina colony in the 1670s, et cetera, more than half the people, white and African-American, white and African, came from Barbados. So there's a very significant connection between Carolina and Barbados.
I just thought I'd throw that out there, my 2 cents.
No, it was a great question. You know, because that's the thing, when we're all looking at these DNA lists, right? When you pull up your, you know, whoever, right? We're looking at our list of matches and we're trying to find those, you know, we're looking for those patterns, surnames, locations, and you keep seeing the same surnames repeated over and over again. And then you go to read about the region that the family's from, and you find out that there's a connection there, and you don't know right now what that gap is in between. You've got the beginning part and you've got the ending part. And now your job is to try to fill in that gap in between. So since we're talking about that, how do you fill in the gap? What are some pivotal record sets that you could use for South Carolina? Well, we've kind of moved into South Carolina, so let's just keep on that road. We'll go back, we'll circle back around, get a sandwich and some chips and a drink and go back to North Carolina in a second. But
I have popcorn.
Oh yes, Shelly can share her popcorn.
Shelly can share popcorn. I have no food on the table. I just have an Ancestry DNA kit.
Is it on sale?
Actually, no, this is for my nephew. I was supposed to register this before we started tonight, but you know, I didn't do that. I digress. So when you're talking about South Carolina research,
right,
what are your absolute must-haves, go-tos? And when we talk about these sorts of things, when we're talking about state-specific research in these broadcasts and these shows, we're talking beyond the census, right? We're talking beyond the usual suspects, because, you know, I don't want to say my 2-year-old can get to the census, but perhaps he can. You know, he called somebody today and was having a conversation.
Wow.
So maybe he can, but you know, we want to challenge everybody to get them to the next level. And some of these databases and data sets are not right there in your face, especially if they're on a commercial website. They may be labeled differently, and you might have to sift through information in a certain way. So when it comes to especially people of color, you know, this is what we're talking about, the frame from which we're talking about this. What are your like top 3, maybe top 5 resources when it comes to South Carolina?
Freedmen's Bureau records, clearly. And it's wonderful that those are indexed now, but there's a lot more rich detail that can be gleaned from Freedmen's Bureau records by going outside of the index and learning what the various subsets of those records are, and then just going in and reading the microfilms. But there are a lot of record sets here that actually fill in the gaps between 1865 and 1870. So those are pretty important. They did a state census in 1869 and also in 1875. And both of those are at the South Carolina Department of Archives and History, SCDAH.
Just for a second, I just want to pause and remind people. She just mentioned 2 state censuses that are not online.
Thank you.
As in, I can't go ooh, Google, show me how to get to so-and-so, and then the link is just going to pop up. No.
That's right.
You have to go to the state archives, or you have to pay a researcher to go there for you to dig through the microfilm in order to get to the records. I just wanted to be sure, because I'm sure that folks are going to, you know, they may question later or comment later and say, hey, how do you get access to these state censuses? You guys mentioned them on the, you know, on the show, but I didn't find a link. So she said it was 1869 and 1875, correct?
Correct.
All
and
right.
there's also another way that you can get those, and that they have been filmed by Family Search. And so you can order the microfilm to be sent to your nearest Family History Center. And so if you can't get to us, you can get them that way to a location. That's
Something else that I would throw in too as well, the two record sets that she actually just named are pivotal when you're trying to establish a time period or a timeline for your family post-emancipation. When she brought up the Freedmen's Bureau, that is, you know, a government created organization during Reconstruction, you know, before the 1870 census, right? Then we also have these two censuses, 1869 and 1875, that are also establishing a timeline during that pivotal time period after slavery was abolished by the 13th Amendment. I'm bringing this up because I've seen two articles this week alone that say that African Americans were not named prior to the 1870 census. And in just these two examples, yes, I see Angela's face. She's doing this. It's almost like she's voguing. She's not voguing. She's covering her face. And just those, there were two great pieces that were wonderful reportive work that was done, but there were two erroneous statements made in those stories, and they were by very large news outlets. One was BBC and the other was a CBS affiliate.
I saw those, yes.
Making it sound as though African Americans were not documented on a census before 1870. Here you just named two. And my people were too. Now we have the whole free people of color issue, but even in this instance where she mentions two state censuses that took place before 1870, here's a census that took place before 1870.
That's
so
right.
I just want to throw that out there. So keep going with your list.
Okay. And also I would point out that if you're trying to tighten up that time period between 1870 and 1880, if you see your ancestor in 1870 and you don't see them in 1880, that 1875 state census can help you tighten up that timeline again. There were agricultural schedules aside from the 1870 agricultural schedule in 1880. There were actually agricultural schedules done in South Carolina in 1868 and then again in 1875. So here we already have the state census and the ag schedules pre 1870 records. Another one is 1868 voter registrations. We have been slowly indexing those and have a number of them on our website, Low Country Africana. They're really a very significant resource for locating where your ancestors were at that time. It only shows the male of the age to vote. So you're only going to get the male names there, but at least you can sort of pin your ancestor in time and place in 1868, and that can become very important to your search. Another one, because we're not done yet, another one is the 1869 militia enrollments. And these are actually online at SCDAH's online index, and I'll give you the address of that, and then also I'll blog about it tonight. The address is www.archivesindex.sc.gov. So www.archivesindex.sc.gov, and you will find the 1869 militia enrollments on there. Another significant record set in South Carolina for tightening up that timeline between 1865 and 1870 is the tax return record books, and these are available at SCDAH, and they span the years 1865 to 1867. So you can see there are a lot of places that your ancestor may be documented before 1870 in South Carolina. There's a whole suite of records, the Court of Equity and Common Pleas, and these are actually the same courts. The Court of Equity was actually just renamed to the Court of Common Pleas in 1868. But there are what was litigated in the Court of Equity and Common Pleas often were any legal issues concerning sharecropping contracts or crop liens. And if you don't know what a crop lien is, it is a formerly enslaved person or anyone who is taking out a loan for their future crop. And so when you look at a crop lien, you'll see someone who was making loans at that time. Like, for instance, here in the Low Country, Joseph Dill was making an awful lot of crop liens with people. And frequently what you see is freed person mortgaging animal in order to secure the crop lien. So what the crop lien was is you were actually borrowing money ahead of time to be repaid at the end of your crop. Well, if you didn't have a good crop, if your crop failed, then you could fall into a debt cycle known as debt peonage. And it was, a lot of people have compared it to another form of slavery or of keeping everyone a yeoman. So crop liens are a very significant resource for the period between 1865 and 1870. We have some crop liens on the website. I think we have the James Island crop liens, which is Charleston district. And as we find more, we continue to put them up there.
I would also add too that also isn't just specific to South Carolina.
That's true.
You're gonna find liens in the area that my family's from. They were actually filed in mortgage books. They were, and they could be in deed books, whatever, and they would say for the year 1875, for the year 1867, XYZ person has loaned $200 for supplies, clothing, and whatever else. And it's also him and his family.
That's right.
It's or her and her family is allowed to use however much money this is for the year, calendar year, whatever it is. And so that's also potentially a slavery tie. And Shelley also brought up, follow the money, land, water, and faith, and you'll find the people.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And so if you fell into debt peonage, what happened was you were already entering this year's crop cycle with last year's debt. And so as the years went on, unless you really had a bumper crop, there was really no way to get out of that debt. So you just every year continued on and on and on, trying to keep your head above water. And this happened to a lot of people throughout the South, not only in South Carolina, but elsewhere as well. Also in South Carolina, there are actually Confederate pensions that mention African Americans. Any African Americans who were conscripted or who served in the place of a slaveholder or who accompanied a slaveholder to the field of battle or to the front may have received a Confederate pension. And there's a book out there, and let me think of the title. I believe it is South Carolina's Confederate Pensioners, African American Confederate Pensioners. Also, you can find those in the South Carolina Department of Archives and History online index, which was the address that I gave you previously, www.archivesindex.southcarolina.sc.gov. You'll find the index there, but the actual records are held at the archive. You can order them, or the book. You can order the book, South Carolina's African American Confederate Pensioners. So there again is another record set that tightens up the time period between 1865 and 1870. Now, if you're dealing with Charleston, in Charleston, there's a robust set of city records. The South Carolina room at the Charleston County Public Library and also the city archive at the Charleston County Public Library have birth registers that are very robust in information. In the birth register, the information that you see listed there. You see the name of the child, when they were born, when the birth was recorded, because often you had midwives who were delivering babies in the rural areas, and sometimes they didn't get to Charleston for 2 or 3 days to register those births. Well, you'll find both of those things in that register. You'll find the name of the midwife who delivered the baby, which is just incredible. When I had a first look at this record set, I was blown away by that. Then you have the name of the mother and the maiden name of the mother. Then you have the father, you have where the mother's from, where the father's from, and then finally the exact date of when that baby was born. You also have death records from the city of Charleston starting in 1821. And some of those are on ancestry.com. They're indexed in a funny way. In Charleston, the way they're listed is in the register. And if you look at one of the original images on ancestry.com, you'll see this. It has the date, the name of the slave holder, and then the name of the slave during, the name of the enslaved during antebellum times. So, but the way that got indexed on Ancestry almost makes it look like your ancestor name was actually with the surname of the slave holder. So when you go to those records, those 1821 to, I forget the end date of them, Charleston records in South Carolina, always view the image of the record and not just the index, because it's you're likely either get incorrect information or not find your ancestor that you're looking for. Birth and death registers were started in the 1900s, but prior to that, there's a really robust record in antebellum church records in South Carolina. From the very earliest days of the colony all the way up to the 1880s, you see these church records, and it has births, deaths, baptisms, confirmations, deaths, burials, marriages. All of those things are recorded in antebellum church records for enslaved people. You'll see the name of the enslaved person and who the slaveholder was, for instance, in a marriage record, and then you'll see the name of the groom and who the slaveholder for the groom was. So there are a lot of records in South Carolina that you can consult to tighten up that timeline and even to go back in the antebellum times. And finally, I'll say there's a really robust set of records for free African Americans. There were city records kept of free African Americans. They were required to pay a tax every year. There was also the state free Negro capitation tax records that are kept at SCDAH. Then you have, there's a period during which, after the Stono Revolution or attempted revolution in 1822, there were the laws tightened up drastically to keep control of free and enslaved African Americans. And one of the ways in which those laws tightened up was free African Americans were required to have a guardian, a white guardian, who would be responsible for their behavior. And although it wasn't enforced a lot, so there aren't a lot of records for that, but when you find it, that's an amazing thing, because then you can question what relationship that my free African American ancestor have to this person who became their guardian. So that gives you another thing to investigate. And last but not least, I say you can go to the SCDAH online index at the address that I gave you. I'll say it again, www.archivesindex.sc.gov. And there's actually a way to go in there and use that search form to discover the names of the enslaved if you know the name of the slaveholder. And I can screen share that. I can also put it in the blog post that I'll post tonight. but you can go in there and you search for the name of the slaveholder, and then there's a topic that they added just for us, which was really incredible. We told them we'd love to know if there was a way, you know, to actually just type in the slaveholder's name and find out who the enslaved people were. And they said, well, actually there is. And they added an actual search topic just for us. So if you go in there and you type in the name of the slaveholder, then go down to topics and select slaves, comma, named. Now, if you enter the name of the slaveholder and slaves, comma, named, it will give you every record that's listed in that online index with the names of the enslaved people associated with that slaveholder. You can see sales, you can see estate sales, just a variety of records pertaining to enslaved people. So that's just a little trick that's good to know when you go and search the SCDAH online index.
Can you put the link, Nika, into the chat box, or Tony?
I can.
For the ones that have questions, will you put those links on the sites you reference? Thank you.
Yep.
I know some of
Yes.
them are in there, but
All
when
right.
you speak of them again, if we can see it roll again, then people can grab it and I can share it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay,
I just placed it in there, and then I'm also going to place the area she said, or what she said to do in terms of the instructions,
Right.
like go down to slaveholder and then topic slaves named.
Right.
Tony's
Yes.
name is going to be Tony. Don't you tell me I know nothing about South Carolina. Carrier.
Oh, there's more. There's more.
Tony.
I know there is, but it's gonna be Tony. I am South Carolina Carrier.
I can't keep up.
I'm telling you, if you didn't watch this entire broadcast, but just that section, you're not going to sleep tonight. I can guarantee you're not going to sleep tonight, because she just came in and dropped 72 mics. She basically did what the president did at the White House Correspondents' Dinner at the very end, where he was just like.
Now, I know what I'm going to be doing tonight after the hangout.
Oh, I'm sure.
We're ready to go.
Yeah, we are all ready to go.
Well, and anybody wants to message me on Facebook, I'll be happy to send you links. Now, I got 2 little books. Can I mention those 2, Nika?
Well, I was going to say there's one book that I need to make sure that I mention, because we had a rolling list of things amongst all of us that we were sharing, trying to get our resources up for this particular broadcast. Something that Bernice Bennett mentioned was Slave Records of Edgefield County by Gloria Ramsey Lucas.
Yes.
It's a book, apparently, and it's now indexed and available on Ancestry. She mentioned the South Carolina Archives online database, which that's been talked about. Apparently, those people at the archives, they definitely want to make sure they're going to heaven, because they keep putting these record sets on.
Yes, they do.
And they thought to put slave names index, like, seriously, do they all just want a massage every month for the rest of their lives? Avery Center in Charleston, she mentions that. Also South Carolina Genealogy Society. Of course, she brings up Low Country Africana, which is Tony's baby. The Low Country Digital Library, which apparently is at the
College of Charleston.
Yeah, exactly. Family Search Wiki. Don't ignore the fact that you maybe need to learn geography, dates of when counties and stuff were formed.
Oh, yes.
Kind of stuff.
Oh, yes.
Also rolling through South Carolina before we get to North Carolina. Our friend LaBrenda Garrett Nelson just produced a book called A Guide to Researching African American Ancestors in Lawrence County, South Carolina, and Selected Finding Aids. She was a guest on Research at the National Archives and Beyond with Bernice Bennett on August 25th of this year. So if you're interested in Lawrence County, want to know more about that book, please feel free to search for that particular episode of Research at the National Archives and Beyond to hear LaBrenda talk about that. I want to make sure I've got everything from South Carolina, because we had a whole bunch: probate records, family search. Although they're not as beautiful and nice and indexy as the records on Ancestry, you got to go, you know, it's like microfilm, but you're doing it on a computer. So don't completely rule those out. I'm telling you, South Carolina, throw your hands up. We're not taking our shirt off and twisting around our head like a helicopter. You guys probably don't even remember that song.
You do that for North Carolina.
Exactly, but we're still in the Carolinas though. So that was my segue.
Yeah.
North Cackalack. I'm telling you, don't tell Tony Carrier. She don't know nothing about South Carolina.
You Petey Pablo that in, didn't you?
I sure did.
All I know, it's going to be a late night tonight.
It sure is. And everybody at Linda's job, blame it on Tony. Don't you tell me I don't know nothing about South Carolina. Carrier.
No country Africana.
I was waiting on you to mention Charleston because that's where I'm researching.
Oh, are you? Okay. Yeah. Uh-oh, I just lost my screen. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we should hop on Facebook message after the live chat.
Look at you, honey. You got the encyclopedia at your fingertips.
Okay, North Carolina.
All right, North Carolina, we're trying to give you some equal time. So, Renata, all right, girl.
Well, it won't be equal time. I can tell you it won't be equal time.
But then you talk to us about Franklin County then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm in no way prepared to do what Tony just did, but I will just say that a lot of the record sets that Tony discussed are also available in North Carolina, and so some of them that I'll mention will be the same. I'll try to spend a couple of minutes on the ones that are a little bit different. The ProQuest newspapers, if you can use your public library or any library that has a subscription, has wonderful connections to African American newspapers that have mentioned a lot of the ancestors. That's kind of one of the least, but it's the first one that's on my list, so I just want to mention that. The Freedmen's Bureau records, as Tony mentioned, are a fabulous resource for so many reasons. But one of the main types of documents that you'll find in North Carolina for the Freedmen's Bureau are cohabitation records. And I think Nika has something to put up for that.
Yes, I sure do. Okay. We're going to roll on back. Okay, so one of the things that we love to do on this broadcast is we love to actually show you real records. And that it's not just some hypothetical thing we're like dropping out of the sky and expect for you to understand what we're talking about. So let's go ahead and get that screen share on when it comes to cohabitation records. And this is one of them. It's actually a record that was provided by Tania Kuntz, who is a member of BlackProGen. These are people who are her ancestors. Go ahead and talk about what exactly cohabitation records are, Renata.
So in 1866, the Freedmen's Bureau invited, I guess you should say, all former slaves who had been married during slavery to come in and for 25 cents in most cases record the dates of their marriage, of their slave marriages. Some counties also included names of children that had been born to the couple, but the basic information would have been the name of the couple, the date that they were married, and the fact that they had been living as husband and wife. For me, my great-grandparents' cohabitation record was most revealing because it was, first of all, my first confirmation that they had actually been enslaved, but it also provided my great-grandmother's so-called maiden name, or in her case, former owner, because that's how I found out that she was a Shaw, slave. So those records are extremely valuable. I don't know what happened to the one that was on the screen. Did it go away? Am I the only one not seeing it anymore?
I see the screen.
You still see the one on the screen? Oh, there it is.
There it is.
So I haven't seen the one I sent Nika didn't have a high enough resolution. I haven't seen this one yet, but I believe, yes. So before him appears Rufus Farmville, Turneville, something, and MARIAH Wimberley. So you see that even if your family has retained this name, are you seeing my cursor moving?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. You may not have known the maiden name or the former owner of the female, so that is very valuable. And having been lately slaves but now emancipated lets you know that they were enslaved, and acknowledge that they cohabit together as man and wife, and that such cohabitation commenced on the first day of December 1856. So you get a marriage date for your formerly enslaved couple, and that just opens so many doors for you because, like I said, it gives you those surnames to start using to search information to try to find who owned your ancestors. And from that, you know, one of the other records that's extremely useful is the 1850 and 1860 slave census. I think Tony, did you talk about that, Tony?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So there's a separate census that was done. The slaves are not named, but you get ages and you get what they called race or color, which would basically, for me, it was helpful just in letting me know were my ancestors dark-skinned or light-skinned, basically, because if they were, you know, if they were brown, they'd put down they were black, and if they were light-skinned, they would put down mulatto. Now, it doesn't tell you scientifically who was and who wasn't, but for me, trying to figure some lines out and trying to figure some things out, that was helpful. So the 1850 and 1860 slave schedules are also extremely helpful once you have an owner's name to go by. Also, bastardy bonds were another big thing for me in uncovering information about my ancestors. And here you are going to find information post-Reconstruction or during Reconstruction and after Reconstruction, but also about your free blacks before emancipation. Their information would be recorded oftentimes in bastardy bonds. And what that is, do we have that too, Nika? Do we have a bastardy bond? No? Okay. What that is people who have had children out of wedlock would pay a bond to the county stating, and they would have someone to come in to support them to pay the bond, stating that they're going to care financially for the child and that the child will not be a burden on the state. So it names the female. It tells either that she's pregnant with child. I've seen them say big with child. Or maybe she's already had the child, and it'll tell when the child was born, and it names the father of the child. And I have found these in many cases in North Carolina for women of color who've had children by white men. So, and also for my free African American ancestors, I've found them also. So they're very helpful. Another thing is the Digital Library on American Slavery. This is a very useful resource. It sounds a lot like the one that Tony was talking about that was specific to South Carolina, but this one has all slave states in it.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the one Tony was talking about, you can search by the slave's name, search by the owner's name, search by location. Several different ways to search, and it records information on like slave petitions, and now I'm drawing a blank on the other stuff. It's kind of like almost anything related to slavery. It even has bills of sale, and so that's been a very helpful resource also. The estate records for North Carolina are fantastic. They have been digitized and are on Family Search and Ancestry.com. You can find your slave inventories, hey Bernice, estate inventories, which will name slaves. Sometimes they will name the slaves in family groups. They sometimes will name the ages of slaves. You'll see who the slaves were willed to. Those are wonderful resources. I also had down the agricultural census. I had down the voter registration. All of those things are also available in North Carolina. And another thing that I don't hear people talk about a lot are records from the Spanish-American War. This was, I think, the first conflict that African Americans had their own units other than the U.S. colored, the few that we know, the U.S. colored troops from the Civil War. And the Spanish-American War had a large regiment from North Carolina, and a lot of people aren't aware of it. So it's a wonderful, they have I think it's SpanAmericanWar.com. I can Google it right quick. But they have all of the names, all of the rosters, what counties they came from, what their rank was, information about each regiment, and you will find your African Americans. They were called the Rough Riders. You'll find them there. Am I going too long?
No, I would say we'll maybe do a couple more, and I'll scan through our handy dandy list of, please don't forget to mention this. Something that LaBrenda, she's in the chat, I see her. Hey girl, what's going on? She said the North Carolina General Assembly passed an act concerning Negroes and persons of color of mixed blood in 1866 to validate the marriages of former slaves.
That's the cohabitation record.
That's the cohabitation record. So I just want to make sure that was echoed.
Angela has something real quick. Sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry about that. I just wanted to mention that the cohabitation records were originally, and I'm glad that they were mentioned, by state. The Bureau has some, which you showed a minute ago, but they were done by county, and Dr. Barnetta McGee White traveled over a period of many, many months to just about every county in North Carolina and published a 3-volume book. I think it's called Somebody Knows My Name.
Knows My Name. Yeah, we had that too.
And of those books that were housed by county of those cohabitation records, it's well worth a look, as well as the ones that were not also mentioned in the Bureau as well. I want to say that.
Mortality, the federal mortality census, I think it's called, was done, I believe, 1870 and 1880. And what it was is it listed the names of people who died in that census year, and it gave the cause of their death. You can sometimes find your ancestors there that weren't in the 1870 or 1880 census. I think those are the right years. So that's also been very useful. And then I just wanted to mention again how wonderful the North Carolina State Archives is. There's so much there, but one of the things I'm not sure if it's the same in South Carolina is for each county they have what's called slave records. It's just a separate file or box or recording category, and there are miscellaneous slave records for each county, so it really varies who has what, but there can be bills of sale, there can be hiring. I've found, letters of hire. My own ancestor, unfortunately, was a trader, and I have found records with him where he has hired out slaves to different plantations, and the promissory note of a jacket, a pair of shoes, and all of that is in there, and it names the slaves and how old they are sometimes and physical conditions that they may have. And then not to be missed are the miscellaneous records for each county. because there's just a plethora of information in those miscellaneous records, and lots of it pertains to slavery. And the last thing, at the archives, they also have church records for original North Carolina churches, and in those churches, many slaves used to attend church, and they are often named on the church rolls as slave members. So all of those are helpful resources for North Carolina.
All right, I'm going to actually go ahead and go through our laundry list of, please don't forget to mention this when it comes to North Carolina. And I'm actually going to read something from someone named Renata Yarborough Sanders.
That's me.
Which is you. Okay, you talked about, let's see, records of apprenticeships for most North Carolina counties. She says she hasn't found them all in one place, but many of them are on the North Carolina US Gen Web website. That's free 99, as in $0 to access that. Southern Historical Collection at the Wilson Library at University of North Carolina is another awesome resource. Tons of primary documents, family papers, letters, photos, ledgers, more. Large digital collection. You can get there. It's even better. They also have the African American portal, and that will put the link there in the chat area, library.unc, and it's got some other forward slashes and whatnot. Rubenstein Library at Duke, including the John Hope Franklin Center, and the North Carolina State Archives, which you named. Lots of resources, digitized data, city directories for Raleigh, Wake County, and many other large cities are available as well. Let me make sure I've got everything. ncdigital.org, digitizing records like crazy. They actually have a lot of digitized historically black college and university student newspapers and yearbooks at ncdigital.org. Digitalnc.org, I don't know if the difference between those and the other one, maybe somebody bought the domain before the other person did, who knows? Gosh, let me make sure I've got everything. I think that was it for what you all had mentioned, but I'm telling you, somebody better be taking copious notes tonight, or you better watch this on the replay, because we mentioned a lot of stuff.
Can I add? I wanted to say one thing about the voter registration records too. In North Carolina, this might be everywhere. They had to give the name of a direct ancestor who had previously voted. And so because of that, it gives you, sometimes they're naming a slave owner who they know was their father. Sometimes they're naming a free black who was their father or grandfather. So the slave records, even though it's nice, I mean, the voter registration, it's nice to say, oh, my ancestor voted. It's really also giving you some information that could take you a generation back, or prove a connection for you. So,
all right, and we've got Sor Bernice Alexander Bennett with the church finger. She's ready to chime in. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Miss Bernice, so you can chime in, ask a question, whatever, because we got to get the current events. We got 3 current events we need to talk about tonight.
I'm in a listening mood right now. Because I want to chime into the current events.
Oh, okay. So she said, nope, I'm not talking about it. So, gosh, well.
I think James wanted to add something for North Carolina.
Go
and
ahead.
I have something too.
Mr. Prince Hall, let's hear it. Let's hear it. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. James Morgan. Yeah, Morgan the third. I'm sorry. Let me give the other 2 their credit.
Thank you.
Do you have a question or a comment?
Actually, this goes out to my North Carolina ancestry. I should have been the 4th, but the first James Morgan had a different middle name than I do. So that's a little Snapple fact. You never know. You could be on Jeopardy. You never know.
All
okay.
Right.
I did want to say, just in my own North Carolina ancestry, something that's kind of really surprised me when I first started was how detailed North Carolina documents are in compared to some of the other states that I've researched myself. Just for example, when y'all talked about those cohabitation records and everything, I mean, I think these are my 3rd great grandparents. They have a cohabitation marriage record here where it says that they were married July 4th, 1866, as far as the government was concerned. But then but then at the bottom, this was the highlight of the record for me, is that they actually noted when did they get married while they were enslaved. And that took me back another 11 years, where they said they originally were married February 17th, 1855, not 1866. But, you know, I like little nuggets like that I find in death certificates and different things in North Carolina really make it a very interesting state to research. So I just wanted to point that out. That was all.
And James, just to clarify, that date that they give for the marriage while they were enslaved, that really becomes their wedding date. Like, that is their wedding date. The date that you saw, July, whatever, 1866, that's just the date they went down and paid their quarter.
Absolutely.
To record the marriage. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, they're really awesome records.
Okay.
All right. Anything? That's right. Miss Angela's got a comment. She's got a comment.
I'm sorry. Never mind. I lost my turn.
Go ahead, James. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, rest in peace to Tupac Shakur. He actually had North Carolina ancestry, and today is the 20th anniversary of his death. So if you research his ancestry, he actually has ancestry on his mother's side back to Lumberton, North Carolina. So I just wanted to make sure I slid that in there.
Okay. Well, I want to just mention, Tony mentioned it in passing as well. North Carolina Freedmen's Bureau is totally amazing. That state has so many field offices. So for anyone watching, Asheville, Beaufort, Charlotte, Edenton, Elizabeth City, Fayetteville, Franklin, Franklinton, Goldsboro, Graham, Greensboro, Halifax, Henderson, Hillsboro, James City, Jefferson, Lexington, Lincolnton, Lumberton, which you just mentioned, Magnolia, Morganton, New Bern, and I have one more thing about New Bern, Oxford, Plymouth, Rocky Mount, Salisbury, Smithfield, Statesville, Whiteville, Wilkesboro, Wilmington offices. If you haven't started to use the records of the Freedmen's Bureau from North Carolina, you've got to get busy. And some of these places were not far from each other. Such rich data, and it's just essential, certainly, that you include that. I mentioned New Bern, North Carolina, a little known North Carolina history fact. During the thrust of the Civil War, there was a major epidemic of smallpox. And the epidemic was so large, they needed to hire people to work in a facility that was established in New Bern, North Carolina, and it was called the Contraband Smallpox Hospital. These were contrabands. These were self-emancipators. These were freedom seekers. And there is a list of the nurses that you can find in Record Book 94 at the National Archives. And I can blog something about it. I have blogged about Black nurses before on my USCT blog, but I will list some of the people of color, because there is in fact a ledger at the National Archives called Colored Contraband Nurses and Colored Contract Nurses. Record Group 94, there's a ledger that you can look at with the names of all of the women and men who were hired to work in the Contraband Smallpox Hospital in New Bern, North Carolina. Tons of other things there, you know, to look at. You all have added plenty, so I'll stop there, but just wanted to add those.
And I do have one thing I'd like to add.
All right.
Okay, and last Thursday, I had a guest on my show, Christopher Everett. And Christopher Everett is a film director, and he spoke about his film entitled Wilmington on Fire. And this is about the 1898 massacre and coup where they overthrew the government in Wilmington, North Carolina. The actual film is going to be released on November the 10th. So individuals that are listening, I hope that you will pay attention to this film. It has a lot of historical information in it, and it's definitely worth watching.
All right. I actually shared on Facebook. I'm like, if you didn't watch this live, oh boy, you might want to go and get a coffee or your dinner or something else later, turn a Roku on or your smart television and just let it roll, because there have been resources galore tonight. And this broadcast, this show is not alone. We've done these for the Indian Territory. We've done these for Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. We've done these for several southern states. And we'll be doing more next year, but we're not telling you where we're going. Ha! All right. So moving on, we've got some current events that we need to talk about. And, you know, we would be remiss. We wouldn't be BlackProGen if we didn't have a discussion about these things. And so, number one, in recent news, if you've been following anything in the news lately, as it refers to African American research, African American history, we've got to talk about the Georgetown slave sale. There's no way that we can have this gathering of great minds, brilliant minds here, and not have a conversation about the Georgetown slave sale. We don't necessarily have the time to get into all the specifics. They do have a very, very detailed website that catalogs the history, who the owners were, the impetus for the sale, all that kind of stuff, if you want to figure that out, if you want to know more about that. But what we're here to talk about tonight is our thoughts about the process for, I don't want to call it reparations, but righting the wrong that took place. We all have our opinions on what should be done. The university has taken the stance that they will give preferential treatment to the descendants of the formerly enslaved people. They'll give preferential treatment or a second review, or whatever they call it, legacy review for their applications if they apply to go to the school. But no mention of scholarships has been offered, anything like that. Go ahead and provide. Let's just chime in. Everybody, unmute yourselves. Come on. Make it like you're sitting there at a barbecue and we're all getting ready to argue over this.
Let me jump in. I'm an admissions officer. I've worked in higher education for many years. I admitted to recent assistant at Tufts University, by the way. But anyway.
I'm about to apply to Tufts University.
Pardon?
I said I'm about to apply wherever you're working.
I've been working for 25 years. What they're going to give is legacy status. And a student still has to meet basic requirements for admission. But that is only addressing those who are applicants to the university who happen to be descendants of the enslaved. That is not dealing with others who, number one, who have decided, oh, I'm from rural Louisiana. A city like Washington, D.C. is not for me. My first choice is actually Grambling or Southern or Fisk or A&T. My first choice. What about that? Because those are viable places to get an education. That's an issue too. And giving legacy status doesn't mean that you're in. It means that, yes, you will get a second review before a final decision is made. That's what legacy status really means. But there's a lot to it, and I'll let somebody else talk before my dad dies.
Well, my general reaction to the recommendation was that what did the descendants have to say, and what kind of involvement or did they engage them in by saying, what do you want? What would meet your needs? They may say, we want somebody to help us do our genealogy. We may need assistance with really understanding what happened, maybe a forum. But from my perspective, I would like to see, and I'm not a descendant, but I would like to hear directly from the descendants concerning their needs and their wishes. Because the scholarship, while it is good and it's a worthy recommendation, it may not meet all of their needs.
Well, and that's kind of where I'm at. We both have ancestry tied to the Florida parishes in Louisiana, and a number of these slaves were sold down to the Florida parishes or to South Louisiana. So right now, Miss Bernice, I'm talking about the two of us, we may not have identified a tie right now, but we very well could be descendants of some of these folks who were sold down.
Yes, very much so. I agree with you.
And with that said, I think, and this is just from the outside looking in, right? We're not a part of any of this. We're just chiming in as genealogists and family history researchers. I think perhaps maybe they thought maybe the one or two descendants that they knew of getting their buy-in was a one size fits all for all the descendants. And in this case, when it comes to, you know, something like that has been done, there is no one size fits all. Everybody's going to have different needs. Everybody's going to have different wants and desires. You know, some of these folks may have already attended Georgetown. Some of these people may have already gone to college. So what do you do with somebody who's already gone to school? What does preferential treatment or legacy status, what does that give to somebody who's already completed their education? You know, there's that. I think the genealogy piece is great, you know, to have somebody trace your family history, but there's a difference between just, you know, it's the same thing as this.
Right.
I can give this to my nephew. He can get the nice percentages and that's it. Or I can break down what this actually means and what it does. And what the implications are and making the connections to other people. It can be just a test or it could be a tool. And I think that potentially, I know my son just woke up.
Oh.
He's having problems. He's a Tyrannosaurus Rex right now because he had no nap. So I think, like I said, I think we can't use a one size fits all thing for this. In every situation when it comes to, you know, maybe doing reconciliation with a former slaveholder's descendant, you know, there is no one size fits all. There is no website you go to and say, I am XYZ, and this is how, you know, we're going to answer that question. Or this is how we're going to proceed. Before we wrap up this topic, anybody else got anything they want to chime in with regard to it?
I mean, I thought it was a nice gesture, but I got 4 words for them. Show me the money. Like,
yeah, really?
Show me the money. Like, I
love. Wait a minute. Did you see how Teresa came up from behind that tea? She had the tea right here, like she was about to give you the tea.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, show me the money. Like I mean, Georgetown. Mind you, I go by Georgetown University every day to work. And I see how big and how expensive the campus is and everything like that. And you know, and I think that we should. I mean, I'm not a descendant, but I think that those descendants, if they want to take advantage of that program of going to school there, or they, you know, whoever, it's fine. But I think that there should be some financial assistance set up for them, specifically for them, because I mean, you go to these big name colleges and whatnot, and there's funds set up for this family foundation, blah blah blah. And I think that it's high time that those who profited from the slave trade pay for it now. And I could go off into reparations, but I'm telling you, I will be that will be a double hour show if I did that. So, but I just feel like it's a nice gesture. And I know the university is doing some other things like working groups and scholarly stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm like, look, y'all made money. This was a business. So to me, it's like back then it was business. Now they want to be gestures and, you know, teddy bears. No, it's business. Y'all made money, so money.
All I have to say is whoop on that. And the other thing I will add as well is most universities, especially Ivy League universities at this point in time, have established enough of an endowment to where if students have certain income issues where they're able to academically achieve whatever status they need or scores they need or grades they need to be able to go to that university, but their parents can't afford for them to pay to go. If they meet certain income requirements, their education is paid for. Stanford University is one of the first colleges in the United States to actually offer that sort of a program. Harvard has it as well. To me, I would imagine if Georgetown considers themselves to be of a certain tier of university, especially in this instance when it comes to slavery sales and the fact that the university profited from a sale of slaves and kept it alive or kept it afloat, I would imagine that sort of a fund should be made available to those students, just as they would be at any other major Ivy League university. We'll take a couple more comments, and then we have 2 other topics we got to get to with regard to current event.
I'd like to add a comment regarding Georgetown. I'm a big proponent of education and work even with the student development program where I work. It's okay to offer the scholarships, but I think it needs to go a step further and to ensure that those students that come through there not only get the scholarships, but also get the internships and then job assistance right after that.
I battery died a minute ago. I just wanted to add that, you know, a lot of people were affected by the sale, not just 272 people that are listed. There were families left back in St. Mary's County, Maryland, families that followed the Jesuits to Baltimore County to Woodstock, who were part of the team, and to work at Woodstock College, which is a seminary for Jesuits. They took African Americans from St. Mary's with them. The Jesuits owned slaves in St. Mary's County. There are people in Maryland, in Baltimore, St. Mary's County, still Roman Catholic, who are descendants of those families who saw their loved ones sail away. And they are also victims of that sale. And I hope that somewhere genealogically they are included, because again, they were just as pained and affected by losing family. Also.
All right, let's move on to our next subject. Number 2, let's talk about people of color cemeteries. What do I mean by that? Oh boy, we could talk about this for an entire broadcast. But in brief, if any one of you who's watching has done any type of cemetery research, you've gone back to your ancestral place of origin and you've discovered, you know, the cemetery where your maybe second, third, fourth, maybe further back ancestors were buried, and you get to the location and you discover it's overgrown. It's the headstones are in a horrible condition, need to be cleaned off. A number of different things, or perhaps I was about to say, yes, or perhaps somebody has paved. Maybe somebody's paved their driveway over the location of your ancestors' graves. In this instance, what do you do? Let's talk about that, because there's a whole organization that is created. The organizations called PAC, or the Preservation of African American Cemeteries. They exist for this very purpose, to go in and you know, restore African American cemeteries, you know, call attention to them, give people the proper tools on how to clean it, you know, for the headstones, things like that. I mean, a number of different things. In this week's latest current events, Teresa actually, let's talk a little bit about your experience and what you encountered this weekend.
Oh my God. Well, if you read my blog post, my ancestors are buried in someone's front lawn. That, you know, this whole experience, my family's goes back to Greenwich, Connecticut, which, if you don't know the stereotype of Greenwich today, it is upper class, moneyed, white as white can be. Okay. My ancestors, and I have to say, I'm the descendant of lion slave owners and of lion slaves. So a couple of months ago, I wrote my blog post on my Green and Merit ancestors that go back to the 1700s, probably 1600s too. And I was invited to put together an exhibit next year at one of the historical societies. And so the director of the Rye Historical Society was like, oh, 2 of my board of directors know this woman who lives adjacent to what was originally called the Colored Cemetery. It's now the Byram African American Cemetery. So I have cousins who literally still live 5 minutes from that cemetery. So that should tell you my folks never left the area. 2 of my cousins went there, and this woman, oh my God, I pulled up and I'm like, I don't know about you, Pat and Eddie, but somehow a little bit negative. And seeing that the Colored Cemetery was her front lawn. And if you read my blog post, you saw the picture. This woman proceeded to lie in our faces. She wanted to make it seem that a plaque on a friggin' tree was okay. And at a certain point where she invited us into the like $5 million house, said, oh, Teresa, if you do the exhibit, this is going to sound so Greenwich of me. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, it's going to be mighty, mighty whitey of you. She says, I'll throw a cocktail party on the front lawn. And I'm like, I didn't say, you know, I didn't know what to say. So one of the things I'll tell you about, within 24 hours, thank God that for this past year, I only located my 3rd and 4th great grandparents a year ago, about this time a year ago. And I worked hard at cultivating contacts in Greenwich. Yeah, you heard Boston. At the Historical Society in Greenwich, at the Town Hall Clerk's office, with the town, Jeffrey Bingham Mead wrote what I considered, thank God, Chains Unbound, Slave Emancipations in the Town of Greenwich. This book has my 4th great grandparents emancipated.
Hold it up.
So I had cultivated ties. You know, she was asking me to give her, you know, referrals of people I knew, and stupid me went ahead because I didn't know anything. And within, my friends at the Historical Society wrote back and said, Teresa, the town's acquiring all 3 properties. He put me in touch with the director of the Conservation Committee, who basically told me her truth, right? That as soon as, again, my family's late, this has been a 2.5-year struggle town to acquire the land. They want to fence it off, create 3 actually historic cemeteries. There are 2 cemeteries, the Byram Cemetery, the Lion Cemetery. They were all considered cemetery. And I'll be honest with you, some of my white never saw the colored cemetery as the colored cemetery. It was just the African-American old cemetery. So they clued me in, and she was so duplicitous. How can you actually compare plaque on a tree to historically designated African-American cemetery? How can you do that? I thank God that one of the things, I thank God for the contacts I made. Also, ahead and contacted and joined actually as a lifetime member, the Greenwich Preservation Trust. And that organization, it was put together to preserve the house, which Thomas Lyon is like my 9th slave owner, great grandfather. And I call him a slave owner. That's how they are called. They also advocate for historical properties, and I'll probably be forming another Friends of the Byron African American Cemetery organization, whatever. I will be heading to Greenwich, actually, because you don't mess with my dead, because you know what? I'm going to bring the unwanted. 3 interviews with Greenwich newspapers to call this out. That this was a blatant attempt 2.5 years ago to erase the African-American presence in Greenwich. You don't play with my ancestors. That is not me, not today, not tomorrow, never. And it was very clear the whole time we were there, she was talking about flipping that property. And you could see that she had taken over, beautified the property. I hope you can beautify the property with me. And it was a blatant attempt to add to her property. The town knowing, but see, this is interesting. The director of, when I first posted my blog, I didn't have the clarification that I have on it now. The director of the Conservation Commission, wrote me this email, and I took offense because I heard her the first time, but when you send me an email and you take offense at my use of the word desecration, you tell me, as I told you, did you understand? Okay, I got you the first time. So I wrote her an email back and I said, I understand that the town of Greenwich doesn't know the extent of the damage until they acquire the land, but you need to understand there's sacred burial place was disturbed and desecrated. And I don't care if it's a teaspoon or bucket loads. My ancestors can't rest in peace. So we can agree to disagree on what your definition of desecration is, but coming from my family, it is what it is.
So I actually have the photo up right now, just so people can get a context.
That picture right there is and this picture here is in 2009. When we spoke to this woman, the only thing she said, if you go back to the other picture, Nika,
yes,
she told us the only thing she did was she told us she had some bone disease and she had to create a carport. They basically went to the town hall, and there's always been a historic problem with the deeds to these properties. The same thing happened in 1890, same thing happened. So her and her husband did a deed search, found out that it looked like no one owned the property when they did. So they went ahead and desecrated. They cut the boulder, which is considered the house. Her property ends 5 feet from the side of the house. I kid you not, 5 feet from the side of the house is where her property ends. So they cut down trees from the lion cemetery. The only thing she did was line up the stone. She did not mention that she terraced the land. When I saw that 2009 picture on Monday night, that, thank God, I know a couple of friends on the, they have a specific cemetery committee, and I know a couple of people on that committee. One of the girls sent me this photo. I could not sleep that night. In the morning, I woke up and I was heated because, and then she said, get this, I have a degree in anthropology, okay? Cultural anthropology. And she's telling me, oh, we had the money, so we did a survey and we only detected a pipe. I'm not made out of metal. I don't think my ancestors were. And I mean, so when she actually a week later called me and left a voicemail message, and I haven't called her back. I have nothing to say. If I do say something, God help me, please, I don't, go off. She lied, and I think she was more embarrassed because my blog has gone viral within the Greenwich community. Even the director of the Rye Historical Society, who introduced us, I think she was taken back because I think that the woman who owned the house, that the prior owner of the house was the one who first incorporated the colored cemetery. So she was only doing owner did, but that's a bunch of crap. The town of Greenwich basically has surveys of her land. The woman who heads the Greenwich Trust, I thank God for her because she's the one who had an unpaid volunteer who happened to be just kayaking in front of the house, called her and said something's going on. She went over there and the woman's husband said, basically, this is our land. He didn't know who she was. She told me she contacted the town of Greenwich and they basically sat. They didn't want anything because they were afraid of litigation, that these people felt that the town didn't have their paperwork on file would litigate.
So I would say what type of, considering this situation that you have, I mean, it's still kind of evolving, developing, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. What would you, I would say, what would be next steps that you would kind of give someone, especially, I mean.
The next step is next week is the last, again, I'm at the end of it. The last step is next week on Thursday. I'll be heading to Greenwich. I'll be making a statement in support of what the town is doing. And then I'll probably be consulting with the Cemetery Commission, as well as the Greenwich Preservation Trust, as to how the town has already agreed that these are going to be, all three cemeteries are going to be fenced off. They're going to be designated historic cemeteries. We don't know if excavation will be one of the things they do, but if they do, I will be noting that there are protocols to follow, as in what was done at the African Burial Ground, downtown Manhattan, and also the Schuyler Flats Burial Ground up in Albany. And I'll be consulting with them. I will tell you this, we're probably the only African-American family that will be speaking. And we've been, actually the people at the Greenwich Preservation Trust who took up the call, that we showed up when we did. So I think it's gonna go positive moving forward, but it might be, from what I hear, there's some people who are gonna be speaking out against it, and some people who even doubt that there are people buried there.
Well, I think it brings up an important point, though, especially considering when you talk about the great migration of African Americans out of southern areas, or really just the migration of African Americans within the United States, the fact that there are these cemeteries that exist across the country where they used to be in heavily populated areas, but due to migration, people have left those locations. And until someone goes digging into their family history, or someone brings up where someone might be buried, no one even knows potentially that folks are in these locations. And not only just that, they go through disrepair, right? There's no one, maybe the person that was going by and mowing the lawn died, and no one else took the mantle up to continue doing that. There's a story I always tell about someone who was part of the society I'm a member of in Oakland. Her father was the person, whenever someone died, they came to their house and told them, we need to bury somebody. Where do we go? He would leave the house and literally walk the cemetery and tell them where somebody wasn't buried. And before he died, nobody came and asked him who was in that cemetery. Nobody ever sat down and asked.
Yeah,
So,
well, I think you raise a good issue. And one of the things that I think all of us need to be aware of, we need to be making connections with local historical societies to find out if an African American cemetery, and we need to be either joining or creating our own historical preservation. And we need to be linking with other national groups as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, that I actually finished my long-awaited second blog post on Madagascar, but I'm actually heading to Greenwich on Thursday. And one of the things I'm doing is the past week and a half, I've been documenting in the wills people who may be buried in the Byram African American Cemetery. I was in Greenwich last Sunday, met with Jeffrey Bingham Mead, and he told me he had just been at church where people still do not believe that there are people buried there.
Well,
so calling out the names of people who were in the wills, who were either like my folks, I believe both of my fourth great grandparents and some of their children are buried there, as they would have been. And I do know for a fact that my fourth great grandmother was mulatto and was probably fathered by. And I'm just going through the wills and calling out their names because it offends me that there are people today who think can stuff up, in essence, right? No, there can't be people buried there because there are no Black people in Greenwich. They're for today, so they were never there in their erasure of my folks. No way.
Well, and that kind of brings up an important point is when we don't go back and visit these locations, when we don't go back and check on, especially if we don't even know to go back, right? Until somebody's actually gone to dig up the history, we don't know what's happening with that stuff. So definitely thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm sure there are several other people who are watching this who probably unfortunately have the same thing going on, but definitely keep us posted as to the development on all that.
I was just going to say that I look forward to her follow-up.
We following
in touch. Yes.
Well,
all right.
I talk to Teresa like every day, and I just want to say, Teresa, I'm here for you.
I know you are.
Oh my goodness. Well, I will. The last subject for current events tonight is the recent price drop in Family Tree DNA's Family Finder test. As of recently, their test was $79 per test, but now the price has been dropped, it's been $99, and the price has actually been dropped down to $79, I think, in some ways to compete with Ancestry DNA as well as with 23andMe. Do you all think that you're going to be ordering more Family Tree DNA tests, or?
Oh, so this is going to be $79 forever?
Yeah. It's the Family Finder, $79 forever. It's a permanent price.
I didn't even know that. Well, hello.
Yeah, now that I know about it, I might just have to pony up the money. I didn't know.
Oh my goodness. Yes. That's the current price. I actually don't know if a lot of people of color are going to be gravitating towards this. The only reason why I say that is because the database size isn't that large. So unless somebody is trying to hit all three companies, I don't I mean, maybe they might catch some folks on price, but what do you all think?
I don't see the benefit of it. I mean, I've tested with 23andMe and Ancestry, and because you can transfer your results over to Family Tree DNA, I don't see the point.
I've tested it everywhere. So my point is this: I use each test differently. You know, I right now find myself thinking that Ancestry DNA is a little bit more valuable simply because of the family trees.
Mm-hmm.
I started with 23andMe. They still give you the most bang for the buck, and if you know your haplogroups, which in my case, I tested first at 23andMe. That's how my cousin Andrea the haplogroup. So, you know, I tell people if they can afford, because you know, once you do one DNA test, most people want to do another one. People have the money. I always say 23andMe first, but if you don't, Ancestry DNA. Family Tree DNA has a higher CM threshold, so people might not get as many matches as they would on the other tests. I mean, that's something else that you have to consider. And then again, if you do decide to go and get your mtDNA test or your Y-DNA test, you're still adding a lot more money to it. So it just depends. Ancestry DNA, you can upload the GenMatch and upload the family tree. It's going to be interesting.
Absolutely. All right. Well, unless anybody has anything else to add, I'm going to go ahead and wrap everything up for our amazing show for this evening.
I have one thing.
All right.
To add, I did want to let them, it's really for folks who are in the Washington D.C. area, but you never know, somebody might drop in on me. I've actually been invited to speak at Howard University, which happens to be my alma mater. In October 28th, the history department is hosting a program entitled Reconstruction Revisited: African Americans at the Dawn of Freedom. This is a day-long symposium. I will be speaking at the 4:25 p.m. panel discussion on institution building during Reconstruction. But the symposium is going on all day, starting I think at like 8 or 9 in the morning, and going through to that evening. So if anyone's in the area, you don't have anything else to do, would love to see you there. At least if you can make it to the panel discussion where I'm going to be talking. You know, and if not, that's cool too. But hopefully I'll see somebody there.
Yeah, and something else I'll add in before Miss Bernice pieced us out. I'll be actually on. She deuced us out. She was like, "Bye, I gotta go." This Thursday's episode of Research at the National Archives and Beyond, Miss Bernice Alexander Bennett will be interviewing me. We'll be talking about challenges and opportunities when it comes to your African American genealogy research. And you're probably wondering, well, what are we going to be doing next month? Let's talk about that. All right. So your next episode of BlackProGen is going to be on Tuesday, October 11th, 2016. Same time, same bad channel. We'll be talking about the best of libraries for people of color research. And this is going to be awesome. Of course, people are like, why would I go to the library when I have stuff online? That's what you think. Just wait till you hear us talk about what we got in our little pockets and whatnot. And following that, the last hangout of the year is DC, Maryland, and Virginia genealogy. So it'll be just like this one for North Carolina and South Carolina, but we'll be talking about DMV metro area when it comes to your genealogy research and family history stuff. So any last thoughts before we end it all tonight?
I'd just like to say,
don't all talk, everybody.
I just want to say I'm still awake 2 hours later. Yay.
I just want to say watch for the blog post for everything I mentioned. I'll put it on Low Country Africana tonight.
Absolutely. And don't forget, if you're interested in our Ask Mariah session for your brick wall questions, or if you want us to do the full panel of genealogy research on you with all of these wonderful, illustrious experts, feel free to apply for those things. I'll include the link in the description for this broadcast of BlackProGen. And also, if you have any questions feel free to tweet us at BlackProGen or hashtag your tweets with BlackProGen Live or BlackProGen. I am Nika Smith signing off here from Tennessee.
Who are you?
Well, we're talking Jeopardy questions here, right? So
who are you?
People always ask me, why did I choose that website? Well, I'll tell the story again. When I went to go and just get nikasmith.com, somebody had already bought it. And I believe that they were sitting on it on purpose. And so I needed to start a website. So I'm like, well, gosh, what could I do? I don't want to add a J or anything like that because my name's already hard enough to spell because it's not phonetic. So I said, gosh, well, what should I do? One of my favorite albums is Who is Jill Scott? So that's why I said, who is Nika Smith? Because if you're going there, you want to know who I am, right? So now eventually what happened, the person who actually purchased my name as a domain actually were caught slipping. They are going to email me and try to bilk me out of $1,000 for it. Well, they let it expire, and I went and did that whole GoDaddy and got it for $11.99.
There you go. There you go. Speaking of albums, I want to leave with this quote before I go to sleep.
All right.
For every dark night, there's a brighter day. That's from Tupac Shakur. Once again, rest in peace to him. I'm about to go to sleep.
All right. So thank you all.
Well, this has been fun.
Thank you.
It's fun.
Thank you, everybody.
And what the last thing I will say is everyone always wonders where they come from. Why not talk about it? BlackProGen Live. See you all October 11th.
Speak on it. Yes.